For so long, Mercedes were synonymous with success in Formula 1. Last season, though, that all changed, but this year they're heading back to the top of the sport. That is, assuming that a little problem called porpoising can be solved. With the preseason test coming this weekend, everything will be revealed soon enough, but there are signs that we need to be worried about Mercedes' chances of being competitive again. Stick around to find out more. When winning becomes a way of life, nothing is more painful than losing. That is a lesson Mercedes learnt last season. For 8 seasons, that's almost 160 Grand Prix, Mercedes' supremacy in Formula 1 was near absolute. Any who dared to challenge their might were quickly humbled. Until Max Verstappen and Red Bull fought them to the brink of defeat in 2021. And even then, it couldn't have possibly been closer. The final laps of the deciding race robbed Lewis Hamilton of a deserved world championship, in the words of team principal Toto Wolff. Disgusted by the event, which cost their driver an unparalleled 8th championship, Mercedes channeled that anger over the winter. The W13, the first of a bold new ground effect era, was to be the most aggressive car Brackley had ever produced. Everything went wrong though, and the only thing aggressive about the car was the damage it was doing to its drivers' backs. Watching Lewis Hamilton getting lapped by Verstappen in Italy just rubbed in how wrong they had got it. With the dawn of 2023 comes a new opportunity for Mercedes to re-establish themselves at the very front and renew their fierce rivalry with the new world champions. The team's pride will not allow for another year of humiliating mediocrity. Fortunately, team principal Toto Wolff is confident that his team have learnt the hard lessons that such a disappointing year can bring. I think we've understood how we fell back and where the shortcomings are, where we have gaps in understanding or had gaps in understanding, and we're working hard on putting a car on the ground that has addressed all of that, Wolff said. But we will only see when starting testing whether we have unlocked the potential that we believe has always been in the car. With all the will, hard work and good intentions in the world, nothing will matter if Mercedes can't get their bouncing under control. And this is where the bad news might start for Mercedes fans this season. The team's technical shakedown and filming days at Silverstone after their car reveal did not go nearly as well as they would have wanted. Every member of Mercedes staff that has sat in front of the media in the off-season has been asked if the problem has been solved, but none of them have had the confidence to commit to an answer. In answer to a question about the new car design bouncing, technical director Mike Elliott said, "Well, we have to hope not. I think if you look at the learning we took from last year, you look at the tools you put together, hopefully we've got all the metrics in place to understand what we need to do with the car so that it doesn't bounce, but fingers crossed." Unfortunately for Mike, the early indications are that he hasn't been able to do his job in the off-season and the bouncing is back. A clip emerged from the filming day that showed Lewis Hamilton bouncing his way around Silverstone with a head nod that looks a lot like porpoising. There's a lot more footage released by Mercedes showing neither driver bouncing, but the lack of porpoising in those clips doesn't really mean anything. Let me explain why. The conditions at Silverstone were wet. That means that the car has to have more ground clearance than they would on a dry track. We know for a fact that more ground clearance means less porpoising. We also know that porpoising only happens at high speeds, and during a wet filming day, the drivers won't be pushing at 100%, and therefore will be driving at slower speeds. With the conditions and the situation taken into account, the fact that there is evidence the team are porpoising should make everyone worry about how the car will run in the dry when being pushed more, such as at the Bahrain preseason test this weekend. Sky F1 commentator Karen Chandhok joked, "Maybe he's nodding about how good it is," underneath the clip of Hamilton's bouncing head as he took the W14 for a run in the wet at Silverstone. Nürburgring endurance champion Bradley Philpott, who posted the clip, was challenged by others suggesting it was a result of a bump in the track. Philpott replied, "Still does look more like standard, albeit small porpoising. It's definitely not just one bump. It begins as the speed ramps up and continues for the remainder of the straight. And in the wet, with raised ride heights, you would expect to see less porpoising anyway. As much as we wish this problem was resolved, this definitely looks like porpoising, and that is the worst possible thing that could happen to Mercedes this season." Other clips were posted showing Hamilton's head still as he drove down the Wellington Straight, yet Philpott contends, if this is porpoising, it wouldn't be happening all the time, only at high speed. Especially in the wet, most of the time they'd be going too slow to see it. If I was part of the Mercedes media team, I definitely wouldn't be releasing clips of Lewis Hamilton or George Russell porpoising if it had happened. so this clip must have been leaked to Bradley in some way. Mercedes won't be happy about that. George Russell refused to reveal whether Mercedes had fixed their porpoising problems when pushed on the problem. The 25-year-old simply replied, "You'll see next week." If there were problems, he definitely wouldn't have revealed them during interviews after a filming day. But the fact they aren't denying the existence of porpoising could be an indication the phenomenon is back. However, both drivers praised the W14 after getting their first spin ahead of the new campaign. Russell added, "We know preseason testing in Bahrain will be the first real test of the car. Nevertheless, it looks great out on circuit, and the feeling from within the car is so far, so good." Hamilton has also not opened up on if the bouncing was solved, but the 7-time champion stressed he was comfortable behind the cockpit after criticizing last year's machine. Part of the problem for Mercedes is that if there is a problem, they only have 3 testing days and 3 free practices before the first qualifying of the season at the start of March in Bahrain. This is a fact that Mercedes are very aware of, and are very keen on getting changed for the future. Up until the late 90s, Formula 1 teams could be found around the world testing new parts midweek before the race weekend. This drove innovation and helped teams iron out problems with their cars, but it also cost a fortune and created a class divide between the richest and poorest teams on the grid. Obviously, that's bad for the competitiveness of the championship, and it's very bad for the financial stability of the teams. This was banned, but the teams had 3 preseason tests, each of 4 days in length, to evaluate the new designs they'd created over the winter. The amount of preseason testing has been scaled back since then though. The only reason there were 2 3-day tests last season was because of the complete overhaul of the cars. A reduction in testing time has helped level the playing field and reduce costs, but those who have the money for more testing, such as Mercedes, want a return of more testing time. George Russell believes 3 days just isn't long enough. He said, "Personally speaking, I don't think 3 days is enough. You've got to remember, from a driver's perspective, that is 1.5 days per driver. We were fortunate to do the tyre tests last week, but had we not, that would have been getting on for 12 weeks out of the car from Abu Dhabi to Bahrain." Russell believes the teams should be allowed to run 2 cars at the preseason test. "I think that would probably be the best compromise for all of the reasons why they're trying to limit it. But right now, 1.5 days per driver I think is too few." With preseason testing being held in Bahrain, the location for the opening race of the season, the incremental cost of having the second car there a week before the Grand Prix would be minimal. Yet, as always, the bigger teams would take bigger gains from the extra testing time and the subsequent analysis, something the FIA is keen to prevent. The lack of testing time could be a big problem for Mercedes if their porpoising problem has returned, as it seems it may have. With just a week between the 3-day test and the first race of the season, there's no time to design new parts and get them to Bahrain to solve any problems. If porpoising is back, Mercedes will have to fiddle with their setup to eliminate it. Remember, the FIA will be punishing any teams that are bouncing this season as well, so Mercedes won't be able to let their drivers race with the problem anymore. They'll have to raise their ride height until they aren't bouncing, losing valuable performance. Will Mercedes have solved the porpoising problem, or are they going to struggle in the same way they did last year? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and on your way down, don't forget to subscribe to get all the reaction to this week's preseason test. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.